Hello and welcome to another edition of Foreign Dispatches. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, Taliban celebrates as final U.S. troops leave Afghanistan, ending 20 years' presence in the country. Celebratory gunfire echoed across Kabul as Taliban fighters took control of the airport following the withdrawal of the last U.S. troops in Afghanistan. U.S. officials said that together with allies, they managed to evacuate some 123,000 people before the August 31st deadline.
Celebratory gunfire echoed across Kabul in the early hours of Tuesday as the last American troops withdrew from Afghanistan after 2 decades of war. There were cheers and car horns as the last planes left the city. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid commended the insurgents for gaining independence and said his government wished to have good relations with the United States and the world.
We want good relations with all countries and we expect others to not interfere in our affairs. We are part of the international community, but we do not want our country to be a victim of war or interference. We are on the path of peace with all nations. Our country is in the process of healing, of rebuilding, of coming together.
Taliban soldiers were seen inspecting damaged aircraft and equipment at the Kabul airport after the last U.S. troops withdrew. As U.S. troops departed, they destroyed more than 70 aircraft, dozens of armored vehicles, and disabled air defenses that had thwarted an attempted Islamic State rocket attack the day prior. The U.S. said it evacuated about 123,000 civilians, including 6,000 American citizens, in what was its largest non-combatant evacuation in U.S. Army history. But around 100 to 250 American citizens remained behind.
There's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out. And there still would have been people who would have been disappointed with that.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken vows to help Americans still left in Afghanistan and says Washington will hold the new Taliban government accountable.
Now, U.S. military flights have ended, and our troops have departed Afghanistan. A new chapter of America's engagement with Afghanistan has begun. It's one in which we will lead with our diplomacy. The military mission is over. A new diplomatic mission has begun. We will hold the Taliban to its pledge to let people freely depart Afghanistan. The Taliban is committed to let anyone with proper documents leave the country in a safe and orderly manner. We will continue our relentless efforts to help Americans, foreign nationals, and Afghans leave Afghanistan if they choose.
He also says the U.S. will stay focused on counterterrorism.
The Taliban has made a commitment to prevent terrorist groups from using Afghanistan as a base for external operations that could threaten the United States or our allies, including al-Qaeda and the Taliban's sworn enemy, ISIS-K. Here, too, we will hold them accountable to that commitment. But while we have expectations of the Taliban, that doesn't mean we will rely on the Taliban. We'll remain vigilant in monitoring threats ourselves, and we'll maintain robust counterterrorism capabilities in the region to neutralize those threats if necessary.
Amidst evacuations, a suicide bomb attack last week claimed by Islamic State killed 175 people, including 13 U.S. service members by the airport gates. The final departure took place after U.S. anti-missile defenses intercepted rockets fired at Kabul's airport. Tuesday's deadline for troops to leave was set up by President Joe Biden, fulfilling an agreement reached with the Taliban by his predecessor, Donald Trump, to end the United States' longest war.
The completion of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, symbolizing the end of a 20-year military operation by the U.S., has sparked strong reactions across the political spectrum in the country. President Joe Biden on Tuesday defended his decision, saying staying longer was not an option. He praised troops for organizing an airlift of more than 120,000 people wishing to flee the Taliban regime.
4 U.S. presidents have overseen America's presence in Afghanistan over the past 2 decades. Donald Trump promised to bring Americans home and signed a deal with the Taliban.
We've had very successful negotiations. We think they'll be successful in the end. The other side's tired of war. Everybody's tired of war. That's been a particularly long and gruesome one.
But it fell to Joe Biden to execute the withdrawal.
I'm now the fourth United States president to preside over American troop presence in Afghanistan. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. I will not pass this responsibility on to a 5th.
Although the president has been heavily criticized for the rushed, chaotic end to the mission, he says it was the best available option.
The United States ended 20 years of war in Afghanistan, the longest war in American history. We completed one of the biggest airlifts in history, with more than 120,000 people evacuated to safety. That number is more than double what most experts thought were possible. No nation has ever done anything like it in all of history. I take responsibility for the decision. Now some say we should have started mass evacuation sooner. And couldn't this have been done in a more orderly manner? I respectfully disagree. Imagine if we'd begun evacuations in June or July, bringing in thousands of American troops and evacuating more than 120,000 people in the middle of a civil war. There still would have been a rush to the airport, a breakdown in confidence and control of the government, and it still would have been a very difficult and dangerous mission. The bottom line is there is no evacuation from the end of a war that you can run without the kinds of complexities, challenges, and threats we faced. None.
In his first remarks since the final pullout, President Joe Biden criticized the ousted Afghan government's inability to fight back against swift Taliban advances and highlighted the role played by former U.S. President Donald Trump.
By the time I came to office, the Taliban was in its strongest military position since 2001, controlling or contesting nearly half of the country. The previous administration's agreement said that if we stuck to the May 1st deadline that they had signed on to leave by, the Taliban wouldn't attack any American forces. But if we stayed, all bets were off. So we were left with a simple decision. Either follow through on the commitment made by the last administration and leave Afghanistan, or say we weren't leaving and commit another tens of thousands more troops going back to war. That was the choice, the real choice, between leaving or escalating. I was not going to extend this forever war, and I was not extending a forever exit.
The U.S. invasion in 2001 stopped Afghanistan being used by al-Qaeda as a base to attack the U.S. and ended a period of Taliban rule. In the final days of the war, 13 American troops were killed in the most lethal incident for U.S. service members in Afghanistan in a decade. For the past 20 years, over 2,400 U.S. troops have been killed in Afghanistan, with around 20,000 others wounded.
Away from the situation in Afghanistan, the new school year has started in Israel. 2.4 million students returned to class this week, despite having one of the world's highest rates of infection due to the rapid spread of the Delta variant. Israel hopes it will be able to contain the spread of the new Delta variant with the use of rapid virus tests and green passes for vaccinated teachers.
Israeli students returned to school on Wednesday with mask requirements and mandatory COVID testing aimed at stemming a surge in coronavirus cases that has overshadowed the highly vaccinated country's reopening. Health officials worry the launch of a new school year with most students attending in person will exacerbate the current wave ahead of this month's Jewish holiday season, potentially forcing another national lockdown. New infections have soared since the emergence of the Delta variant, reaching a pandemic high 10,947 on Tuesday amongst Israel's 9.3 million population. Under what he calls a living with COVID policy, Prime Minister Naftali Bennett has pressed ahead with the new school year, in part by ramping up vaccine booster shots and requiring testing for students and unvaccinated instructors.
After a year of Zooming, a difficult year of fading and staring in front of the screens, I want to wish you, the students of Israel, this one thing: may the year of screens be done away and the year of experiences begin.
But Bennett's government announced the new measures just days before classes resumed, drawing criticism from parents who say they were given little time to prepare.
For me, it's exciting because I have a kid who's going to third grade and first grade. It's definitely a little bit hesitant because we don't know if there's going to be closures or no closures. The policy is still up in the air. The government changes things around. But we're hoping for good, and we're hoping that the vaccinations will help.
Students under 12, the minimum age of eligibility for the vaccine, must present their teachers with a parent's note confirming they performed the rapid test at home and received a negative test. Such testing is not required beyond the first day, but officials say further testing could be done before or after the Jewish holidays, where large family gatherings are common. The first of those festivals is on September 6th, the last September 30th.
So yesterday, the day before the first day, all of the kids in our school performed the quick test, the antigen test. They need to bring the test result to us in order to start the school year. It's not mandatory, but it's something that we ask the parents to collaborate with us. So hopefully we can start the year with everybody being healthy and safe. And throughout the year, to be honest, I'm not really sure. We just have to go with the flow.
So we did the home COVID test and it was negative, so it was good. But I had a problem with my big boy. He was afraid of it very much. And I said, I'll do it to you, don't worry, everything will be fine. But so it took a while to convince him.
In areas with particularly high infection, schools where less than 70% of students are vaccinated are required to conduct remote learning. More than 2.1 million people, more than 20% of the country's roughly 9 million people, have received a third dose. Israel was one of the first countries to vaccinate its population early this year, allowing the government to drop almost all restrictions on public activities.
Elsewhere in the Middle East, online learning in Dubai private schools will soon end as the government mandates a complete return to in-person classes for all students at all levels. The new directive, which comes into effect in October, will also see the return of assemblies and activities including sports and swimming. Our correspondent, Maiwa Adigoke, has more.
New directives by the Dubai government to schools mandate a complete return to in-person classes starting from the 3rd of October.
I have a daughter of my own and she has struggled I see she has struggled in her social skills. She doesn't understand that she can share. There are several other components of education which cannot really be obtained online. So I'm very excited that kids are going back.
In a 22-page guideline, government says schools are to ensure students maintain a 1-meter distance, while children aged 6 and above are to wear masks at all times.
So all schools now will be making sure that they've updated all of their policies, and then any of the information is put across to children. Classrooms will be adapted to make sure that there's that meter apart. We had placements on the floor so children knew where they would stand.
Extracurricular activities, including swimming, sports lessons, school trips and camps, have also been reinstated.
Some students are not academic. They thrive on that kind of competitiveness that you have in sports. So I just think it's really great that those non-academic subjects, like maybe that some students lean towards, and now they'll have their chance to shine again.
Local authority says that although 96% of teaching staff and 70% of students have taken the jab against COVID, vaccination is not compulsory. Eligible school staff who do not wish to have the vaccine must submit a negative PCR test each week. Students, however, are not obliged to do the same.
You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. Health authorities in Brussels have started offering COVID-19 jabs in supermarkets and shopping centres to increase vaccination rates in the Belgian capital that have not kept up with the country's rapid vaccination rollout.
Host to the European Union and NATO, Brussels has jabbed 64% of adults, much lower than surrounding Belgian regions.
The Brussels problem is a complex problem. We have 182 different nationalities here in the Brussels area, so with a lot of disabled people, a low socioeconomic background and so on, so very difficult to target and a little very different kind of populations.
Lagging behind in vaccinations, Brussels has started offering COVID-19 jabs in supermarkets and shopping centres.
In the beginning of the campaign, we asked people to go to a vaccination center. Now we really try to bring as much as possible the vaccine to the people. And so we're selecting a number of areas where a lot of people are passing by. And so we try really to offer them the vaccine at their place, actually at their environment, where they work, where they go to school, where they live, and also where they shop, of course. And that's why we opened these vaccination points in the shopping areas.
I actually didn't want to get vaccinated. But I've changed my mind. At first I was afraid, but now I've seen other people taking it who feel better, so I'm no longer afraid.
Some worry that Belgium will follow neighbouring France and require proof of vaccination to be able to go into cinemas and cafes.
I didn't want to get vaccinated. I didn't want to do it. It looks like it's going to become like it is in France. To go into a restaurant, you have to show your vaccination pass, and that's why I decided to do it.
Meanwhile, the European Commission has announced that 70% of the European Union's adult population has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, hitting a target it had set at the beginning of the year.
Today, we reached an important milestone in our vaccination campaign. 70% of adults in the European Union are now fully vaccinated. And that is more than 250 million people who are immunized. And this is a great achievement, which really shows what we can do when we work together. But the pandemic is not over, and we must remain vigilant. So first of all, we need many more Europeans to vaccinate rapidly, to avoid a new wave of infections and to stop the emergence of new variants.
The announcement marks an important milestone in the EU vaccination strategy after a slow start, but it also marks big differences among EU countries, with some nations being well above the 70% goal, while others in the poorer eastern region of the bloc are far behind.
South Africa is also ramping up vaccination numbers with a number of out-of-the-box initiatives, from pop-up centres to drive-thrus. We visited one of the centres near Pretoria, where community volunteers are supporting the government in the vaccination drive.
The Svatkop racing track in Centurion near Pretoria is a crowd favourite, but this queue of cars came not to race, but for a shot in the arm, drive-through style.
It's very simple, to be honest. People shouldn't be afraid. They must just come through and get their jab. And that's it, because just received my jab and feeling healthy, nothing so far.
If people are still afraid of the needle, I can tell you that COVID is going to be much worse than the little needle prick. So it's just, that's just one of the things. The vaccine is safe. It's 100% safe. It's been tested. It's been around. There are millions of people who have already been vaccinated. I don't see any reason why not to go in.
This is a partnership between the community and the provincial government of Gauteng. We decided to set up this drive-through, the first for the capital city of Pretoria, because there's a massive demand. We've got long queues every day. People want to get vaccinated. They sit in the luxury of their car. They get the jabs. They got a choice between Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson.
The Premier of Gauteng, David Makura, came to see what community effort has achieved here with volunteers. This drive-through vaccination centre reached a 10,000 vaccine milestone this week and the numbers are increasing, especially since vaccines opened up to 18-year-olds and above in South Africa.
You're taking your first or your second? First. Okay, fantastic.
Premier Makura commended the younger vaxxers and sent out a plea to men especially to get in line for a shot.
2 weeks ago, we raised the alarm around men. We have seen improvements in the vaccination of men. In other words, just since Friday, more men are taking the jab. And really, that's something that we really want to commend men for. And it's the millennials, the young men are leading in that regard. Women still lead with 55.5% of the vaccinations. It's not a competition between men and women, but we want men to come.
Health Minister Dr. Joe Patla, in a briefing, gave a picture of the current numbers as the country struggles with the third COVID wave, which is lingering longer than the past ones.
The third wave is continuing to behave in a very unpredictable manner. It's behaving differently as compared to the first and the second waves. The case trajectory had shown initially a steep downward trend since the 9th of July. However, since the 13th of August, cases started to trend upwards again after it had started to on a downward steep.
For now, South Africa has vaccinated more than 12 million people. This is far from the target 42 million by year end to achieve herd immunity, but more and more shots are getting in arms daily through drive-through centers like this, pop-up centers at media houses, broadcast live, and schools, as well as the traditional clinics. Availability of the vaccines has been assured by government with over 10 million doses on ground, from locally packed to donations under the COVAX facility. Although the virus variant mutation C12 detected in the country recently may just bring new challenges.
And finally on the program, thinking out of the box and saving the environment. Over the past decade, Japanese artist Monami Ono has used the unusual medium of cardboard to create artwork inspired by popular culture, from anime robots to a life-sized gun and fighter jets. Her intricate sculptures have since gained popularity, with her work exhibited in galleries in Japan and overseas. Take a look.
10 years ago, 19-year-old art student Monami Okuno picked up a cardboard box for a homework assignment and made what she described was a bike-like thing.
When I first tried folding the paper, gluing them and putting them together, the people around me praised me, saying things like, "Wow, you can make this," and that made me so happy.
Since then, she's made over 200 detailed sculptures entirely out of cardboard and glue. Her imaginative, almost lifelike cardboard sculptures have gradually gained a following in recent years. The subject matter of most Okuno's work can usually be found in popular culture, ranging from giant robots from popular Japanese animation films to small-scale model kit-like renditions of tanks and fighter jets. In Okuno's words, she selects her subjects based on what she would like to see displayed in her own home.
I basically only make things that I like. For example, I make the things that I would really like to decorate my house with, so I have a preference in mind.
Rather than relying on precise blueprints, Okuno simply draws a rough sketch on the cardboard to get an idea of the measurements before cutting out the design and molding it using glue and sometimes a little water. Her work has been displayed in galleries at home, in Japan and overseas, but most of it isn't for sale. Instead, Okuno often relies on custom sculptures that she is commissioned to produce as a source of income. Okuno's commissioned pieces have sold for $1,000 to $13,000 US.
Well, this is where we say goodbye till next time. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Stay safe.